Hi, welcome everyone. My name is Nicholas, or Nicolas. Thank you for joining us for Dream and Process. This is the first episode. So, what is the show? Dream and Process is a show inspired by my tradition of curanderismo. And we have, in that tradition, platicas are a very important part of that. And that's a space for people to share their ideal realities, to share any blocks that they may be facing along the way and release whatever is on their heavy heart. So to honor that, I wanted to bring a show to people that where people can talk about their dreams and their process of achieving those dreams. So today I have a really awesome guest. Her name is Mimi Young, and I'll be bringing her up in a bit. And we're going to be talking about our dreams. But before we get started, I kind of wanted to let you know that each episode I'm going to be sharing a piece of my story. And since today is the first episode, I'm just gonna give a brief story about the beginning. So, yeah, once upon a time, there was there there was a family, and this family may not have been your typical family. They definitely have their different dynamics and a lot of hardships. And one night, the mom had to go to the hospital because she was in an abusive relationship with the dad, and when she got to the hospital, the the doctors told her that they recommended her to have an abortion because that baby would never talk or walk or live a normal life. They told her, but she decided to still have that baby, and that baby was born happy and healthy. He has gotten to experience life to the fullest. He's gone and graduated college with a master's, like undergrad and master's. He's worked in the corporate setting. He's hosted some art events and makes a lot of art, and he's a healer. And that's me, Nicholas. And along this, a big part of the show is to show the process of what it takes to realize and achieve your dreams. And for me, an important part of that process is like acknowledging that story of where I've been, and learning along the way too. I actually called my sister this morning and asked her some detail. I was like, hey, like, I know there's drama around the time that I was born, but like I've never asked and no one's told me, like, could you tell me what happened? And she was in fourth grade at the time, and she said, like, this is like my first like full memory that I remember like super clearly. And she told me some of the details like leading up to my birth. And since I'm mentioning her, she one of her favorite stories to tell, I call her Stina, her name's Christina, is that everyone thought I was going to be a girl, even the doctors and like everyone in the family, but she was the only one who believed that I was going to be her baby brother, and I was. So yeah, I want to give a shout out to my sister. She's amazing, and I love her so much. And another part of this show, like, is there is another part of this show. Like, I was originally like, I knew that I wanted NFTs to be involved somehow because that's a big part of my life now, and I think it's a big part of the way we're going society in the future is on the blockchain. So I wanted to make that a part of this show as well. And so I kind of wanted to show you guys the process it takes to create an NFT, the purpose. So I'm going to start from the very beginning. We're in the process of creating this NFT, and I'll go ahead and show you. This is the artwork for it. My friend Janet is commissioning. She put this together in our hour or 2 hour coffee session that we had the first time we met. And so this is a very rough sketch of what the artwork will be like. The NFT itself will go to help fund this show and other healing events and and also for me to invest in learning more about healing as well. So, and along the way, we're going to be talking about what it means to create an NFT, where do we start, and how do we build utility into it? What is the purpose of it, and what are people going to get out of it? So today, I wanted to show you, it aligns with my beginning, also the beginning of this NFT. So this was just our first meeting, and it's going to be my story that I tell throughout this season. And it's circular, and in the center is the beginning. It's an eclipse, the moon, with the sun behind it, and then an image of a baby inside. And so that is the part of the story that I wanted to share today with you guys, or that I did share with you today. And next week, or in 2 weeks when we have the show again, I'll share a bit more about another piece of this story. But yeah, so thank you again for joining me today for Dream in Process. And now I'm going to go ahead and bring on Mimi Young. 1 second. There you are. Hi, Mimi.
Yes, thank you so much.
How are you?
I'm doing very well, thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much for being here today. Just so everyone knows, Mimi Young, she's an amazing person, and she is one of my mentors, and I consider you a friend as well. And yeah, and I appreciate the presence that you've had in my life it's been almost 2 years. Yeah. So since the mystery mentorship started, and that's, yeah, I'll let you go ahead and introduce yourself and let people know who you are.
Thank you so much, Nicholas. As Nicholas had said, my name is Mimi, and I'm a spirit communicator. So what does that mean? If I were to use labels, I guess it would mean that I'm an intuitive, that I'm an animist, that I practice witchcraft, that I dream deeply and interpret dreams and can understand the languages of the spirits, that I can smell psychically, that I can sometimes hear psychically as well, and receive visions. I tend to communicate mostly with beings that have passed on, including folks in my lineage, such as ancestors, but also beings that have passed on in other people's lives, as well as spirit beings that are more connected to land. So tree spirits or plant spirits, animal spirits, elementals. And yeah, I love to teach. Education for me is a real joy. And part of, I think the joy of it is that I'm also the learner. So it's not so much that I'm a teacher, and I'm careful to say that I teach, but I don't actually consider myself a teacher, because I feel that if anything, I'm learning all the time, learning from the great mystery, or learning from the unseen. And I also love to hold space for folks. So what Nicholas had shared was through a multi-module series but I also hold space in the capacity of a single event or a single live stream, um, and also via readings. And I also hold space through the energetics of topical plant medicine. So primarily through skincare and aura care, where you can, by working with the same plants that I have called into each bottle, each jar, that you can also feel that space holding. Yeah, so that's what I do in a nutshell.
Yeah, and I mean, you are really good at what you do, and you're really good at holding space, and you're an incredible teacher. Like you helped me access like a lot of information that I was searching for a long time, but didn't know where to find it. And you just made it so consumable and um, like easy to connect with. Like, yeah, and I appreciate it so much.
Thank you.
Um, so to get started, I was actually wanting to have a little moment for some grounding and mindfulness. And I really love how you start your classes or how you kind of set spaces. Would you mind hosting the space for us?
Yeah, of course.
Awesome. I'm going to light some copal for us.
Sure, thank you. For folks who are tuning in, feel free when you are ready to just begin to close your eyes softly. It's more allowing your eyelids to just feel heavy and to lead you into a softening. And it's so easy to experience visual distraction. And so having your eyes gently closing can be really supportive. And with this idea of the beginning as today's theme, I feel that beginnings, and we are in, at least in the Northern Hemisphere, we are in the beginning season, spring as a beginning. And yet, even though there's a lot of energy that's already beginning to activate, there's also that other part that may have not yet been fully potentiated yet. So really inviting each of you to tap into that pause before the activity, to slow down and to slow right down. You may notice that that slowing down is showing up in your body through a lengthening or a deepening of breath. Maybe it's slowing down by you noticing parts of your body that hold stiffness or extra energy. Sometimes I might even feel tense. And just inviting those parts, perhaps it's your shoulders or your jaw, maybe it's your belly. Just allow those parts to begin to soften and the earth beneath you to catch you, to hold you, and to anchor you. And Nicholas, I actually can smell the copal, FYI. The spirits are bringing them here. Yeah, when you feel that you have slowed down, ask yourself if it's possible to slow down a little more. And likewise with that softening, as you begin to feel softness, ask yourself if there's any edges that can continue to be softened. And as part of my practice, and I know this is part of many people's practices, I like to give a land acknowledgement. I'll start, Nicholas. So I like to acknowledge that I am an uninvited guest, a settler here on Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh Nations lands. I bow to each of these First Peoples and give gratitude for their stewardship and their presence, their advocacy. Very grateful to call this place the place where I live and play and rest. And Nicholas and also all the folks who are listening, feel free to also give an acknowledgement on the Indigenous people or people's lands where you are on.
I would like to give acknowledgement to the Southern Paiute and Wallapai tribes from Southern Nevada. And this is how I lead the spaces the Twitter spaces that I hold on Thursday nights as well. And as I said there, it's acknowledgement is so important for the healing process. Like there's so much healing that needs to take place. And the first step is like acknowledgement and honor and honoring. So thank you.
Just tuning into your body once again and notice any change or shift compared to when we first began today together here online. And just ask yourself if it's possible to continue being in that space of softness and pause. And also asking the spirits to just really hold us and be present as we explore all the topics to explore in today's conversation, in today's storytelling. And just for each and every person who's here, and by here I mean right now live, but also here tuning in later on, just for each and every person to feel really seen and for the messages to be resonant and relevant for all who are tuning in, who are participating in this, receptively speaking. And you feel ready, eyes slowly open.
That was lovely. Thank you. I probably could have used that before I started my introduction earlier. But yeah, so dream and process. We're here to talk about our dreams. And so something I was wondering, are there any dreams that you would like to share, whether you're currently like in the process of them or something maybe you've accomplished already?
Yeah, I love how, first of all, I love how the word dream, it sort of holds two portals, right? Like there's like the portal to the nocturnal, like when we sleep and all the messages or visions or senses that we get through that inner self or through perhaps the spirits around us. And then, yeah, like there's that other portal, the portal to the solar side of things, where it's very much about how, like how those dreams are holding space for what it is that we would love to materialize or be part of. And I feel like a lot of that has to do with what happens in those nocturnal spaces. I think for me, a lot of it, my dreams have a lot to do with life purpose and soul gifts and deep, deep, deep depth stuff, like deep depth stuff. And so, yeah, I feel on a really practical level, I feel that the whole world has gone through so much these past 2 and a bit years that I think that the first thing is like you said, is just like to really acknowledge that and celebrate that. And so that's collectively, and then there's also personally.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, part of that practice is acknowledging um, the, I don't want to say it's not just growth, because I feel like growth is very production oriented sometimes. I feel that for me, it's like certainly there is growth, that outward defined growth, that stuff that's super visible. But I think there's also a lot of softening that happens inside that I'm really really grateful for. And if anything, it's the softening that is more meaningful, and it actually can inform where I want to grow going forward.
Yeah, definitely. I yeah, that softening part, like that is something that I have been not I don't want to say experimenting, but noticing a lot more of. Like when we go through these processes of like facing traumatic things or coming up against road bumps that we weren't expecting, like all of these things that kind of like have the potential to cause anxiety or fear or doubt, um, the more that they show up, because they're always going to show up, like no matter where you are in your life, no matter like how much healing you've done, these things always show up because there's layers to all of it. And so what I'm finding is when we like going through those processes and approaching or learning how to move through them more gracefully, and that kind of helps with the softening. That's what I'm noticing. Like, or maybe it doesn't help with it, but it's a result of it. And being more in a receptive state really helps me to actually like connect with that dream state a lot more and a lot easier for in my experience. So yeah, I do like that you mentioned that. um how do you, well, one, like in your along your journey, have you, like, what are some like difficult things that you've had to face, or like difficult like experiences or themes maybe that you've had to face, and like what are some practices that help you, that have helped you or that have come out of those experiences?
Um, I feel that maybe I'm just trying to think about what would be most relatable for folks, how to share it in a way where the delivery is a bit more relatable, because I think it's easy for me in the storytelling to get almost like lost in the literal details, but um, and some of it is a bit private too, because it involves other folks, and I'm not quite sure if they necessarily want me to share the story. But I think I can definitely talk about big themes that have showed up and continue to show up in my life that are deeply challenging, and at times even paralyzing for me. I think a big theme is the theme of self-loathing, and I think some of it is, just family circumstance, and how love was communicated or not communicated in my upbringing, and also the immigrants experience. Like I was born in Taipei and immigrated here when I was 2, and so even though I was very young and I've never actually attended school in Asia, I came from a really traditional home, and where all that cultural education happened at home, but then of course at school here in Metro Vancouver, Canada, but the outer experience is really different. So there was a lot of like self-loathing that I think was just from the fear of being an immigrant, and the financial worries that a working immigrant family experiences. Also, the layers of political unrest. That's why we left Taiwan in the first place, because Taiwan, without giving a whole lot of history, it's never really been an island that has sustained an immense amount of political stability and rest. There's always been the threat of colonizing from all over, and continues to experience that. And then, of course, there's like that racial difference of like, wow, like this is what I look like, and this is my culture, but this is not the environment that I live in. It's not reflective of that, and I don't know anyone that looks like me. I don't look at. There's no one that I look up to that also looks like me on media, let's say. So there's all these components I feel that have factored in. I don't think it's like one thing, but I do find that self-loathing has been a theme for me, and it's interesting because the more I learn from it, and the more I see it as an ally to teach me how to love myself and to teach me how to love others with total abandon. The more I discover that that theme is still there.
Yeah, yeah, that's like a theme that is coming up for me right now is like boundaries, like setting self boundaries. I've never been good at it. And well,
Totally. I get it.
yeah, and like the ancestors are coming in hot with that right now. Like and so I'm learning like, okay, there's like, okay, we did boundaries before, right? And we got good at it, but now it's time for the next layer, that next level. And like it, some people refer to life as a game, and like the more that I go through these leveling ups, I'm like, oh, I can totally see like why people say it, life is
Mm.
like a game, because you're like, as we go through these processes, we really are leveling up as people, um as yeah, as going like going through those levels of things that we need to work on. And sometimes I think like some lessons may show up at certain times, but I think some of us, um, there's lessons that are going to continue to keep showing up, like you said, like with self-loathing for you, and for me it's the boundaries is the biggest one, because I say yes and give myself fully to everything and everyone all the time, and you can't do that.
Yeah, you totally can. And for me, that actually, in my opinion, that's actually a symptom of self-loathing, because
Mm,
you're not able to honor your capacity by saying no. And for me, it's I feel that I'm feeling more equipped to set boundaries with other people, but to set boundaries with the voices in my head is a huge challenge, and that is something where I need to really be present with daily, because it's so easy to get beaten up by those bullies in the head. And so yeah, like that's one of, like you asked earlier, what are helpful tools. I would say setting boundaries with myself, when like the boogeyman, so to speak, shows up in my head, saying things that can lead me down like self-loathing avenue, that I can be like, well, hold on a second, actually that's not true. Why am I even engaging with this? Or like it's that. And yeah, I mean, for me, I see it show up in so many places. Like let's say boundaries, let's say the tendency to overwork, let's say the tendency to be maybe addicted to like intensity, and uh, oftentimes identifying myself as like the helper or the caregiver sort of role. And I feel that in many ways, those were all, at least in my story, symptoms of someone who deeply does not know how to love herself, and looking for ways outside to arrive at that, and realizing that I can do all I want, or even do all I don't want, because it gets to that point, where it has in the past gotten to that point. And if I do without, whether if I'm wanting to or not wanting to anymore, if it's not actually serving that capacity to really love oneself, then it, like I have to ask myself, like, well, what is the point in this?
Yeah, definitely. And earlier you mentioned you have to have a daily, like you have to check it daily.
Oh
Like
yeah.
what does like what are some practices, or what is a practice that really helps you like be mindful of this daily?
Yeah. And I feel that maybe it's important to talk about, like to define ritual and practice, because I feel
Yeah.
that a lot of people in the new age space tends to define that as um, something like a big peak spiritual experience on the top of a mountain, or in the middle of some, fabled desert, where like, like these figures and archetypes show up, and smoke in the background, and I don't know, but for me, they're habits. They're me. It's just like how, anything's a habit. Like making your bed's a habit. Drinking 8 glasses of water a day is a habit. So it's that. It's because it shows up in my everyday, um, very, mundane life, like where none of that glamour is there. And so for me, it's just me tuning into my body and asking, how do I feel? How do I really feel? Do I hold tension? Where is that tension? I also really pay attention to the food I'm eating, because there's food that you think you should eat, and there's food that your body really desires to eat. And it's the information of what your body craves that can reveal a lot. So if I'm craving a lot of sweet foods, such as like, cookies and like baked goods, anything with sugar, like refined sugar, it tells me two things. Number one, I'm either really craving emotional sweetness, which is like means I'm probably not speaking to myself with kindness and sweetness, and that's why I'm wanting, my chocolate or my muffins or my cookies or whatever. And then B, very likely I'm very tired, and I'm looking for a big like sugar spike to keep me going. That's just one example. So, and I'll notice this with other things. Like, for instance, the past 2 weeks, I've been craving a lot of my traditional ancestral foods, a lot of Taiwanese dishes. And I've realized it's actually because the ancestors really want me to have more of a sustained conversation with them, rather than just like a quick check-in every day. And so much so where like I like actually just this morning I sat down with them, and we had a really good conversation, and it's because they speak to me through food, through my body. So those are little things that I find helpful.
Yeah. Um, when, how, are there any warning signs for you? Like when, like, oh, like maybe something is out of balance, or like maybe I haven't been doing these practices. Like, how do you know, like, oh, I need to like get back to this, or I need to like intervene here?
Yeah, I I'm laughing right now because I didn't know that I'm a very stubborn person until recently, which is so funny because it's like everyone around me in my life, like my sibling, like, like my parents, my partner, like everyone's like, you're so stubborn, Mimi. And I'm like, no, I'm not. And the thing is, actually, I think they're right. And so the spirits tend to give me signs, like you said, the warnings, and they're usually pretty subtle in the beginning.
Hmm.
typically through dreams and through little scents through my nose. Um, and then if I'm not paying attention, they just keep communicating, except they just turn up the volume, so to speak. So they'll do things that deliberately make me feel frustrated so that I finally start slowing down, paying attention, and I'll say like, okay. I'll give you talk about storytelling. I'll give you one example. So this was actually last year, but this example is so vivid that I just feel, and it's actually quite funny now that I've experienced it and look back. So they were asking me to hold space for a certain offering through my business. And I, at the time, was like, no, I don't think this is a good idea. I don't think anyone else out there is going to find it interesting. I'll have no enrollment or like very low enrollment. Why bother? And they just said, I think you should give it a chance, Mimi. Like, do it, do it, do it. And I was like, no, no, no. And that was mainly through just daily psychic conversations. And then because I kept on saying no, and I was essentially running away and like purposely, I had purposely booked certain other commitments during that time. They said would be a good time to do it, like just as a way to kind of like say no. They countered that by purposely making sure that those things didn't get filled, which is so funny. And in addition to that, it got to a point where I was taking like clean dishes out of the dishwasher. And I was having an argument with the spirits. I was saying no. They said yes. And so much so that I actually dropped a glass and it like shattered on the floor. And then I was like, oh. And so I wind up turning around and grabbing a broom, cleaned it up. And then I turn around to resume emptying the dishwasher. And I do that again, not once, but twice. So there were 3 broken glasses. And you'd think I would have figured it out by then that they really wanted my attention, but it took that 3rd glass. And then I'm not, like, I'm kind of, like, I mean, I guess you can say that maybe I was being clumsy, but I don't really break dishes often. And so it was just this interesting thing how even my hand felt slippery, because I'm pretty sure that the spirits were wanting to just have me listen. And so finally at that point, I was like, okay, fine, I'm listening. And then they laid out in their perspective why it would be a good thing for me to proceed with. And at that point, I was like, okay, I got it. Yes, like let's proceed. So yeah, so like my warning signs might not be the usual ones, but I do think that there are warning signs out there for everyone.
Yeah, I know for me, for a really long time, like the warning signs were so drawn out. And like you said, like the 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 volume gets amplified. Like when you ignore it, or like if you're unconscious to it, like things just keep happening and they kind of escalate until you're like, whoa, like I need to do something. I need to change. And so they used to, like, I remember them being so drawn out, but then like now with more awareness of who I am and like my energy and just more mindfulness practices, now it's like way less time. I'm like, okay, something's out of balance, or like I'm getting these messages. I don't, not quite the same as you, but like I get these messages in different ways, and I'm like, okay, I need to like at least sit down and listen, like listen, tune into myself, or like tune into whatever this is. And um, it gets easier to like um, take action for me in a shorter amount of time than it used to. Like I used to fall into like long bouts of depression, like for months at a time. And like it was almost like out of body experience. Like I could just see myself doing all these things, that were like not good for me, questionable decisions, or like just standing in the pantry, or like my usual like habits of what to do when I retreat. And now it's like, okay, if that does start to happen, now I'm like, okay, we're getting okay, for a week I've been feeling this way. Let's do something, like do something to change it. And for me, that always has to come from like like I have to be coming from a place of gratitude. And that's really how I can like break those old patterns, those old cycles. Yeah, thank you for sharing. Earlier you mentioned like ritual, and um like you have a shop called Shop Ceremony, and ritual and ceremony is obviously very important to you. I remember like 2 years ago. Yeah, it was 2 years ago. In 2020, is like I had like this huge awakening. Like it was really intense for myself and the people around me, and but I just remember like at the very beginning and throughout, and what still stayed with me was like everything is a ritual. Like everything has to be a ritual like in my life, and because it is. And whether that's brushing my teeth, or like my full moon ritual, like, or taking out the trash, like all of it is a ritual and has purpose. And when I started like seeing life in that way, that's really when things started to shift for me and really started to manifest like this reality that I'm in now. um yeah, like how can people incorporate more ritual, or how can they think about ritual so that they can bring more of that into their lives?
I totally resonate with what you said. Everything can be a ritual, and yet it's so easy to make that sound like a catch-all phrase, or it can almost potentially
Mhm.
become like spiritual bypassing, where like
Yes.
certain behaviors
Mhm.
that are not super intentional and special are now sort of kind of lumped under the ritual. I think for me, which is what I'm talking about in my current series. The series I'm currently holding space for is called Prayers and Devotions in Animism. And there are weekly live streams and also with recordings, because there are folks in this group that are enrolled in it that have a dramatically different time zone than PST, and so they tune in via the recordings. But the idea is, and I think it's easy here. I should probably also mention that prayers and devotions maybe are sometimes, at least in this day and age, are perceived in the context of the church, like or the Christian church, and because that's not the tradition I work in. I really wanted to make sure that folks who aren't necessarily part of a religious body still have a space to offer prayers to spirits, to the other beings that are with us and around us, and maybe even beyond, and really develop that relationship with them. And so that's essentially what prayers are, right? Prayers are a form of spirit communication, and then the other part is the devotion, which I think is like what you touched on, is like the ritual in the daily. And for me, when we can enter into acts in our lives and activities in our lives and obligations and responsibilities in our lives from a place of devotion, it can really change things, and can bring more of that softening and more of that heart opening. So, for instance, most of us, I'm going to go back to the dishes. So, most of
Mhm.
us, wash dishes or load dishes in a dishwasher, and so it's easy, after you've made a big meal or even any meal, you're looking at the mess in the kitchen and looking at your dirty plates and your dirty utensils, and you're like, oh, I'm so tired. Like, I don't want to do this. I don't want to do dishes. Or maybe you're, like, I'm thinking about when I was growing up in our home, my brother and I always argued over who did dishes last and whose turn it was. And like, it was just like this thing that we did. And I'm sure it still happens to other people, like with maybe their roommates or maybe with their partner, like, oh, like this, that division of labor. And yet, maybe doing dishes, if we come from a place of devotion and really understanding that the food we ate was alive, the drinks we consumed were alive, the people, of course, that we had the meals with were alive, um, and then the dishes themselves, every fork, knife, spoon, chopstick, doesn't matter. They are also alive. They're most likely made of the earth, whether they're wood or metal or ceramic. They're alive too, at least in the animist tradition. So we can approach the dishwashing as, let's say we're emptying, like the bit of food that we don't consume, the waste. Let's say it's like, the outer stem or leaves or the bones or whatever, and we're discarding this into our compost. We can say thank you to the food, of course, and there are many practices that do that. But do we actually thank the dishes as we clean them? Like, thank you for holding the nourishment for me. Thank you for keeping, my soup warm. Thank you, for placing this nourishment into my mouth reliably each and every meal. And it's like when we can engage with these, what are seen as objects, inanimate objects, but from a place of devotion, you will never wash those dishes the same way again, because there's this immense place of relationship and gratitude and understanding that we're all connected, understanding that the dishes have a place in our lives, and we also, as caretakers of these dishes, should take care of them, and we have a place in their lives too. I feel that it really creates a more magical home, and a home that holds a lot more intention, a lot more sacred beings and sacred practices.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Like, and, and I love that you said that, because to me, like a very like basic element of ritual, at least in my life, every ritual that I perform, it is starting with gratitude, starting from a place of gratitude. And like I mentioned earlier, like taking out the trash and brushing my teeth, it's like, yeah, literally thank my teeth. Like, thank you for the smile and for helping me taste delicious food and for like talking to people and like great photos, because like people tell me I have a great smile. Like, and like taking out the trash, it's like, hey, like all of this stuff, what served a purpose that I needed it to, like, thank you. And then the act of removing it is like removing old and stagnant energy from the home too, not just these physical things, like at the same time, like cleansing the space energetically. And so, yeah, that gratitude and that intention is so important in dream work and like achieving our dreams. When to wrap to wrap up the story time, like, how do you feel when you're able to like overcome these like these hard times of, when that self-loathing kicks in and you're going through it? Like, what does it finally feel like when you overcome that and you're like sitting in that dream or that ideal reality that you've been like waiting for? Like, what does that feel like to you?
For me, I feel that it's this like interesting intersection of multiple emotions. It's the intersection of relief and a sense of rest, but also delight. Like, it's like, whoa, like this feels fun. Life feels fun, and being me feels fun. And there's this like deliciousness and delightfulness in actually loving oneself. And it's from a place of humility. It's not from a place of guardedness or like, because it's not like, I think sometimes people feel that loving oneself means that you have it all together and that you're super confident about everything. I actually would argue it's not that at all. I actually think it's about how do we love ourselves when when shit hits the fan, when we are totally uncertain, when all our strengths are not actually working, do we love ourselves then? That's the kind of stuff, because it's those situations when the self-worth stuff shows up. It's those situations when the self-loathing shows up. If you're living a life of smoothness and everything is exactly how you want it and exactly how you've planned it, then it's very easy, I think, to not even question self-worth and the love piece. But it's more like when everything's taken away. And I feel like that, being able to show up for yourself when you're at ground zero, so to speak, or even negative zero, like negative integers, you're like underneath the ground. I feel that's how you really learn how to love yourself.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. I often think to like how I feel about myself now, like how I love myself and like show up for myself now. And like the level at which I do it wouldn't even exist if I didn't go through like all of those deepest and darkest and scariest and like hardest things that I've had to face. And like when I didn't love myself and when I didn't, like if I didn't know what that felt like, I wouldn't be able to like experience the love that I do feel now, which is kind of a whole nother topic. But like, yeah, like it's like going through these journeys, like and learning these lessons that we're meant to learn in this classroom, and and leveling up, and then coming to this place that like we came, that you or whoever or I came to this space for, to accomplish. And yeah, it's quite a journey.
Indeed.
But do you have any like anything that you would like to share with the audience? Like you mentioned your class, your prayers and devotions class, and was there anything else you'd like to share?
Um, I'm sharing this because we had both talked about boundaries, and um, lately for me, it's the boundary of the self, right? Like boundaries with oneself, and I think it's very easy, and I see this a lot in my practice with folks in my community. Is the huge difficulty around being able to set boundaries around work and honoring the need for rest. So I'm also holding space for 2 live stream group sessions. It's not a course. It's a part 1 and part 2 of a series where we will explore how journeying to the spirit world can really support rest and any type of comfort and soothing as themes. And it's not so much about the learning how to journey as it is just the space of being able to approach journeying in that context. I think so often journeying is approached from the context of divination. So, like you're wanting access on potentials that haven't actually materialized yet, or maybe spirit communication, but it can also be used to rest, to experience deep energetic rest within the aura, that kind of stuff that we don't really give ourselves a whole lot of honoring and space around. So if that's something that anyone, part of your community, part of your audience wants to explore, I do list it on my website.
Awesome. That sounds like a really great class, and I might look into that.
Oh yeah, I think you liked it a lot.
Yeah. Um, yeah, and then that leads me to one of my announcements too, because it is also on boundaries. So on Thursday nights, I so this is being streamed to the NFT community and not the NFT community. So for those of you who don't know, I do have a NFT project with some of our best friends. So that includes like David, my husband, Denver, Jenny Lau, Philip, and Jason. And it's called Sushi Bites. We have these cute little sushi characters, and We actually have a sushi character called the Sushi Shaman. And on Thursday nights at 7 p.m. PST, we host a Twitter space called Sushi Temple. And last week we started a 3-week conversation on boundaries. So last week we started with what is our relationship with boundaries. This week we're reflecting on like maybe where in our lives can we use more boundaries, and then next week we're going to talk a little bit more about like actually actioning and like setting those boundaries and how to support those boundaries. So if anybody's interested, that's Thursday nights at 7 p.m. PST on Twitter. But yeah, and do you have any last words you would like to share with the audience?
Not really, but I'm excited if you do wind up, creating more of that, holding that energy of devotion to the little things in your life, such as when you're doing the dishes or taking out the trash. I would love to hear about it. Yeah, I think it's really beautiful when people start experiencing how everything is so alive and so magical.
Yeah, definitely. So if anybody would like to share about that, like please, go follow Mimi. All her links are below. Like send her, like comment on her stuff, let her know, or comment in the comments down below as well. Like let us know how that shows up in your life. Like, do you talk to your teeth like I do? Or is it something else? So let us know.
Love it.
But yeah, thank you so much, Mimi, for joining me today. I really appreciate it. You're someone I really look up to, and I'm grateful that we can continue this relationship. And I can't wait to see what else we do together.
Beautiful. Thank you.
Have a great one.
You too. Bye.
Bye.